In the 1960s, seniors living alone made no-chew suppers that mattered. The meal was simple when they were too tired to cook. Milk toast and mashed potato bowls weren't weakness. They were wisdom. Then modern convenience erased them. Let's rediscover 30 forgotten no-chew suppers before the last generation that remembers them is gone. Milk toast was the ultimate comfort supper for seniors who were too tired to cook or chew at the end of a long day. The recipe was brilliantly simple. Toast a slice of white bread until golden, butter it generously while it's hot, place it in a shallow bowl, and pour warm milk over the top until the bread softened into a creamy, pudding-like texture. Some seniors added a pinch of salt, a dash of cinnamon, or a teaspoon of sugar depending on their mood. The warm milk soaked into the toast, making it soft enough to eat with a spoon. No chewing required. Seniors made milk toast when their dentures hurt, when they were recovering from illness, or when they simply didn't have the energy to stand at the stove. It was gentle on the stomach, easy to digest, and provided carbohydrates, calcium, and comfort all in one bowl. The cost? Less than 10 cents. The prep time? 2 minutes. Today, milk toast has completely vanished. Most people have never heard of it. But for seniors in the 1960s, it was a lifeline when nothing else felt possible to eat. No chewing needed, just comfort. Creamed chipped beef, affectionately called SOS, Save Our Stomachs, or another more colorful phrase, was the no-chew supper that filled bellies and required almost no effort. Start with a jar of dried chipped beef, rinse it briefly to remove excess salt, then tear it into small shreds. Make a simple white sauce. Melt 2 tablespoons of butter in a saucepan. Whisk in 2 tablespoons of flour. Cook for a minute. Then slowly add a cup of milk while whisking constantly until the sauce thickened. Stir in the shredded beef and heat through. Pour the creamy mixture over soft white bread or toast that had been soaked in the sauce until it fell apart. The result was a warm, salty, creamy meal that required no chewing, just a spoon. Seniors loved this because it was filling, inexpensive, a jar of chipped beef lasted several meals, and required minimal standing or stirring. It provided protein, calcium, and calories when appetites were low. Today, creamed chipped beef is rare, dismissed as military mess hall food, but for tired seniors in the 1960s, it was a warm, easy supper that mattered. No chewing needed, just comfort. Cream of tomato soup was the quintessential easy supper for seniors who needed something warm, soothing, and requiring zero chewing. Open a can of Campbell's condensed tomato soup. Add 1 can of milk, not water. Milk made it creamier and more filling. Heat it on the stove while stirring, and pour it into a bowl. That's it. The soup was smooth, tangy, slightly sweet, and easy to sip with a spoon or even drink from the bowl. Some seniors crumbled a few saltine crackers into the soup and let them dissolve into a soft mush. Others ate it plain. The soup provided vitamins from the tomatoes, calcium from the milk, and warmth on cold evenings. Many seniors made this when they were too tired to stand at the stove, when their dentures were out for the night, or when they simply wanted something gentle and familiar. The cost? Under 25 cents per can. The prep time? 3 minutes. Today, tomato soup is still available, but the ritual of making it for a solitary supper, eaten slowly while sitting at the kitchen table, has disappeared. No chewing needed, just comfort. Now, before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Mashed potato bowl with gravy was the no-chew supper that felt like a full meal but required almost no effort. Seniors used instant mashed potatoes, just add boiling water and stir, or leftover mashed potatoes reheated with a splash of milk. Top with canned beef gravy or chicken gravy, warmed on the stove, and you had a warm, smooth, filling supper. The potatoes were creamy and soft. The gravy added flavor and moisture, and the entire bowl could be eaten with a spoon, no chewing required. Seniors loved this because it was cheap. A box of instant potatoes cost less than 50 cents and made multiple servings. Quick, 5 minutes from start to finish, and satisfying. The potatoes provided carbohydrates and energy, the gravy added protein and fat, and the warm temperature soothed tired bodies. Some seniors added a pat of butter on top for extra richness. Today, mashed potato bowls are still made occasionally, but the solo supper version, eaten quietly at the kitchen table when no one else is around, has faded. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was comfort in a bowl. No chewing needed, just comfort. Soft scrambled eggs with milk were the ultimate quick, no-chew supper for seniors who needed protein without effort. Crack 2 eggs into a bowl, add 2 tablespoons of milk, whisk together, and pour into a buttered pan over low heat. Stir constantly with a wooden spoon, unscraping the bottom as the eggs cooked slowly into soft, creamy curds. Remove from heat while they were still very soft and slightly wet, almost pudding-like. The result was a warm, protein-rich supper that required no chewing, just a gentle swallow. Seniors ate this when their energy was low, when their appetite was small, or when they needed something fast and easy. The eggs provided complete protein, the milk added calcium, and the butter made it rich and satisfying. Some seniors ate it plain, as others added a pinch of salt or a sprinkle of cheese. The cost? Less than 15 cents. The prep time? 5 minutes. Today, scrambled eggs are still common, but the very soft, milk-enriched version made for easy swallowing has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was pure comfort. No chewing needed, just comfort. Milk toast, creamed chipped beef, cream of tomato soup, mashed potato bowl, soft scrambled eggs. 5 suppers that needed no chewing, just a spoon and patience. Seniors made these when their bodies were tired, but they still needed to eat. These weren't shortcuts. They were survival with dignity and comfort. Cream of wheat wasn't just for breakfast. Seniors in the 1960s ate it as a warm, savory supper when they were too tired to cook or chew. Cook cream of wheat according to package directions with water or milk, but instead of adding sugar, stir in a tablespoon of butter and a pinch of salt. The result was a smooth, creamy, slightly savory hot cereal that required no chewing and filled the stomach with warmth. Seniors loved this because it was cheap. A box cost less than $1 and made many servings. Fast, 5 minutes on the stove, and gentle on sensitive stomachs. The cereal provided carbohydrates and energy. The butter added fat and richness, and the warm temperature soothed tired bodies. Some seniors added a little black pepper or a sprinkle of cheese for extra flavor. Today, cream of wheat is still available, but eating it as a savory supper has completely disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was a warm hug in a bowl when nothing else felt possible to eat. No chewing needed, just comfort. Creamed peas were the soft, gentle supper seniors made when they needed vegetables but couldn't chew. Open a can of sweet peas, drain the liquid, and mash the peas with a fork or potato masher until they were mostly smooth. Make a simple white sauce, melt a tablespoon of butter, whisk in a tablespoon of flour, cook briefly, then slowly add half a cup of milk while whisking until thick. Stir the mashed peas into the cream sauce, warm through, and serve in a bowl. The result was a smooth, creamy, slightly sweet vegetable supper that required no chewing. Seniors ate this when they needed something green and nutritious, but didn't have the energy or ability to chew whole peas. The peas provided vitamins and fiber. The cream sauce added calcium and richness. Some seniors ate it plain, others spooned it over soft mashed potatoes or soft bread. The cost? Under 30 cents. The prep time? 10 minutes. Today, creamed peas have disappeared. Most people eat peas whole or not at all. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was gentle nourishment. No chewing needed, just comfort. Cottage cheese was the no-cook, no-chew supper seniors ate straight from the carton when they were too tired to stand at the stove. Small curd cottage cheese was soft, creamy, and required almost no chewing, just gentle swallowing. Seniors ate it plain, with a spoon, sitting at the kitchen table. Some added a pinch of salt and pepper, others ate it exactly as it came. The cheese provided complete protein, calcium, and probiotics, all in a soft, easy-to-digest form. Seniors loved this because it required zero preparation, zero cooking and zero cleanup. Just open the carton and eat. It was especially popular on hot summer evenings when turning on the stove felt impossible, or on nights when exhaustion made even simple cooking too much. The cost? Under 50 cents per carton. The prep time? 0. Today, cottage cheese is still available, but eating it as a solo supper, plain, from the carton, as an entire meal, has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was protein and comfort with no effort required. No chewing needed, just comfort. Chicken broth with overcooked noodles was the warm, soothing supper seniors made when they needed something gentle and easy to swallow. Start with a can of chicken broth or bouillon cubes dissolved in hot water. Add a handful of egg noodles and cook them far longer than the package directions suggested, until the noodles were very soft and falling apart. The result was a savory bowl of soft noodles in flavorful broth that required almost no chewing. Seniors loved this because it was warming, easy to digest, and provided carbohydrates and a little protein. The broth was soothing on sore throats or upset stomachs, and the overcooked noodles dissolved easily with minimal chewing. Some seniors added a pat of butter for extra richness, others ate it plain. The cost? Under 40 cents per serving. The prep time? 10 minutes. Today, chicken noodle soup is still common, but the practice of deliberately overcooking the noodles until they're mushy, specifically to avoid chewing, has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was gentle nourishment in a bowl. Minimal chewing needed, just comfort. Oatmeal wasn't just for breakfast. Seniors in the 1960s ate it as a warm, savory supper when they were too tired to cook anything else. Cook old-fashioned oats with extra water until they were very soft and almost mushy in texture. Instead of adding sugar or cinnamon, stir in a tablespoon of butter and a pinch of salt for a savory version. The result was a warm, smooth, slightly creamy bowl of soft cereal that required minimal chewing and filled the stomach with gentle warmth. Seniors loved this because it was cheap. A container of oats cost less than $1 and lasted weeks. Fast, 10 minutes on the stove, and easy to digest. The oats provided fiber and carbohydrates, the butter added fat and richness, and the salt made it taste more like a meal than a breakfast. Some seniors added a little black pepper or a sprinkle of cheese. Today, savory oatmeal is making a comeback in trendy restaurants, but the tired senior version, overcooked, buttery, eaten alone at the kitchen table, has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was warm comfort when nothing else felt possible. Minimal chewing needed, just comfort. Cream of wheat, creamed peas, cottage cheese, chicken broth with noodles. Oatmeal, 5 more no-chew suppers that kept seniors fed when energy ran low. 10 suppers down, and everyone was soft, warm, and easy to swallow. These meals weren't about giving up. They were about taking care of yourself. Cream of chicken soup was the smooth, savory supper seniors turned to when they needed something warm and filling but had no energy to cook or chew. The process was effortless. Open a can of Campbell's condensed cream of chicken soup. Add 1 can of milk, not water. Milk made it richer and more satisfying. Pour into a small saucepan and heat, while stirring occasionally until it was hot and steaming. Pour into a bowl and eat with a spoon. The soup was thick, creamy, and required no chewing, just gentle swallowing. The chicken pieces in the soup were so soft they dissolved on the tongue, and the cream base was smooth and velvety. Seniors ate this when they were too tired to stand at the stove for more than 5 minutes, when their dentures were out for the night, or when they simply wanted something familiar and comforting. The soup provided protein from the chicken, calcium from the milk, carbohydrates from the thickeners, and warmth that soothed tired bodies. Some seniors crumbled a few saltine crackers into the soup and let them dissolve into a soft mush, adding a little texture without requiring chewing. Others ate it plain, savoring the creamy chicken flavor. The cost was minimal, under 30 cents per can, and 1 can made a full supper. The prep time was under 5 minutes. Today, cream of chicken soup is still available, but the ritual of heating it with milk for a solitary supper, eaten slowly while sitting at the kitchen table in a quiet house, has faded into memory. No chewing needed, just comfort. Mashed sweet potatoes were the naturally sweet, no-chew supper that provided both nutrition and comfort for tired seniors. The preparation was simple. Bake or boil a sweet potato until it was very soft and falling apart, scoop out the flesh, mash it thoroughly with a fork or potato masher until completely smooth, then add a pat of butter and a pinch of salt. The result was a bright orange, creamy, naturally sweet bowl of soft vegetable that required no chewing whatsoever. Seniors loved this because sweet potatoes were inexpensive, especially in the South, filling, and naturally sweet without needing added sugar. The texture was smooth and velvety, easy to swallow without any effort. The sweet potato provided vitamins A and C, fiber, and complex carbohydrates for sustained energy. The butter added richness and helped the body absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. Some seniors ate it plain. Others added a drizzle of honey or a sprinkle of cinnamon for extra flavor. The entire meal cost less than 20 cents and could be prepared ahead of time, then reheated when needed. Today, mashed sweet potatoes are still served as a side dish at holiday meals, but the practice of eating them as a complete supper, alone, in a bowl, with just butter and salt, has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s who needed something gentle, nutritious, and easy to swallow, this was a lifeline. No chewing needed, just comfort. Creamed corn was the smooth, sweet, no-chew supper that came straight from the can and required almost no preparation. Seniors opened a can of creamed corn, poured it into a small saucepan, heated it gently on the stove while stirring occasionally, then poured it into a bowl and ate it with a spoon. The corn was already pureed smooth in the can. No kernels to chew, no lumps to navigate, just a thick, creamy, slightly sweet vegetable supper. The texture was somewhere between soup and pudding, easy to swallow without any chewing effort. Seniors ate this when they needed something filling but didn't have the energy or ability to prepare fresh vegetables. The corn provided carbohydrates, a little fiber, and natural sweetness that satisfied hunger without being heavy. Some seniors added a pat of butter on top for extra richness. Others ate it exactly as it came from the can. The cost was minimal. A can of creamed corn was less than 30 cents and provided a full serving. The prep time was under 5 minutes. Today, the creamed corn is still available, but eating it as a complete supper, not as a side dish but as the entire meal, has disappeared. Modern eaters see it as a Thanksgiving side dish, not a solo meal. For tired seniors in the 1960s who needed something soft, sweet, and easy, this was a warm, comforting supper that required almost no effort, no chewing needed, just comfort. Soft poached egg in broth was the gentle, protein-rich supper seniors made when they needed nourishment but had no energy to cook or chew. The preparation was simple. Heat a cup of chicken or beef broth, homemade or from a bouillon cube, in a small saucepan until simmering. Crack an egg directly into the hot broth and let it poach for about 3 minutes until the white was set, but the yolk was still runny. Pour the egg and broth into a bowl and eat with a spoon, breaking the yolk so it mixed with the broth. The result was a warm, savory, protein-rich soup that required minimal chewing. The egg white was soft and tender, the yolk was liquid, and the broth was flavorful and soothing. Seniors ate this when they needed something gentle on the stomach, easy to digest, and quick to prepare. The egg provided complete protein, vitamins, and healthy fats. The broth added flavor, warmth, and hydration. Some seniors added a slice of soft bread to dip in the broth, letting it soak until it fell apart. Others ate it plain, savoring the simple combination of egg and broth. The cost was minimal. An egg and a bouillon cube together cost less than 15 cents. The prep time was under 10 minutes. Today, poached eggs are trendy in restaurants, but the simple version poached in plain broth for a solitary supper has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was gentle nourishment, minimal chewing needed, just comfort. Farina, also sold as cream of rice, was the smooth, unsavory hot cereal seniors ate as a gentle supper when they were too tired to chew. The preparation was straightforward. Bring water or milk to a boil, slowly stir in the farina powder while whisking constantly to prevent lumps, reduce heat, and cook for a few minutes while stirring until it thickened into a smooth, creamy consistency. Instead of adding sugar, which was typical for breakfast, seniors made it savory by stirring in butter and salt. The result was a warm, smooth, slightly thick bowl of cereal that required absolutely no chewing, just gentle swallowing. The texture was similar to very thin mashed potatoes or thick cream soup. Seniors loved this because it was cheap. A box of farina cost less than $1 and lasted for weeks. Fast, ready in less than 10 minutes, and incredibly easy to digest. The cereal provided carbohydrates for energy, the butter added fat and richness, and the salt made it taste more like a meal than a breakfast food. Some seniors added a little black pepper, a sprinkle of cheese, or a spoonful of gravy for extra flavor. The cost per serving was under 10 cents. Today, farina is still available in grocery stores, but eating it as a savory supper has completely disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s who needed something warm, smooth, and easy to swallow, this was comfort in a bowl. No chewing needed, just comfort. Cream of chicken soup, mashed sweet potatoes, creamed corn, soft poached egg in broth, farina. 5 more no-chew suppers seniors made when they were too tired to cook or chew. Everyone was soft, warm, and gentle on tired bodies. These weren't meals of defeat. They were meals of wisdom and comfort. Creamed spinach was the soft, savory vegetable supper that provided nutrition without requiring any chewing effort. Seniors started with frozen chopped spinach, which was cheaper and easier than fresh, uncooked it according to package directions, then drained it thoroughly and squeezed out as much liquid as possible. In a small saucepan, they made a simple white sauce. Melt a tablespoon of butter, whisk in a tablespoon of flour, cook for a minute, then slowly add half a cup of milk while whisking until the sauce thickened. Stir the cooked spinach into the cream sauce, season with salt, pepper, and a pinch of nutmeg, and heat through. The result was a warm, creamy, and dark green bowl of soft vegetables that required no chewing, just gentle swallowing. The spinach was so finely chopped and softened that it practically dissolved in the mouth. Seniors ate this when they needed vegetables but couldn't manage anything that required chewing. The spinach provided iron, vitamins A and K, and fiber. The cream sauce added calcium, protein, and richness. Some seniors ate it plain, others spooned it over soft mashed potatoes or soft bread. The cost was under 50 cents per serving. The prep time was about 15 minutes. Today, creamed spinach is still served as a steakhouse side dish, but eating it as a complete supper has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was gentle green nourishment. No chewing needed, just comfort. Mashed carrots with butter were the sweet, soft vegetable supper seniors made when they needed something nutritious but couldn't chew. The preparation was simple. Peel and slice carrots, boil them in water until they were very soft and falling apart, much longer than normal cooking time, drain them, then mash them thoroughly with a potato masher or fork until completely smooth. Add a generous pat of butter and a pinch of salt and mash again until the butter melted into the carrots. The result was a bright orange, naturally sweet, smooth puree that required absolutely no chewing. The texture was similar to baby food, but the flavor was rich and satisfying for adults. Seniors loved this because carrots were inexpensive year-round, naturally sweet without added sugar, and provided important nutrients like vitamin A for eye health. The butter made the carrots rich and helped the body absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. Some seniors added a sprinkle of brown sugar or a dash of cinnamon for extra sweetness. Others ate them plain, savoring the natural carrot flavor. And the cost was minimal. A pound of carrots cost less than 20 cents and made several servings. The prep time was about 20 minutes, but most of that was passive boiling time. Today, mashed carrots are sometimes served to babies or toddlers, but adults no longer eat them as a supper. For tired seniors in the 1960s who needed soft, sweet vegetables, this was comfort and nutrition combined. No chewing needed, just comfort. Split pea soup was a traditional hearty soup, but seniors who couldn't chew took an extra step. They strained it until it was completely smooth. Start with dried split peas, a ham bone or bacon for flavor, onions, carrots, and celery, and simmer everything together for several hours until the peas completely broke down into a thick puree. Then, to make it truly no-chew, seniors pressed the entire soup through a fine mesh strainer or food mill, removing any chunks of vegetables, ham, or texture, leaving only a smooth, thick, green liquid. The result was a warm, savory, protein-rich soup that required no chewing whatsoever, just sipping or gentle swallowing with a spoon. The soup was naturally thick from the peas, almost like a thin puree, and the flavor was rich from the ham or bacon. Seniors ate this when they needed something filling, warming, and nutritious, but couldn't manage solid foods. The split peas provided protein, fiber, and B vitamins. The ham added flavor and a little extra protein. The vegetables, even though strained out, contributed nutrients to the broth. Some seniors ate it plain, others added a pat of butter on top or a sprinkle of black pepper. The cost was minimal. A bag of split peas cost less than 50 cents and made a large pot. Today, split pea soup is still made, but the practice of straining it smooth has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was nourishment in liquid form. No chewing needed, just comfort. Soft cheese grits were the Southern comfort supper that required no chewing and filled the stomach with warm, creamy satisfaction. Cook stone-ground grits in water or milk, according to package directions, but add extra liquid to make them softer and creamier than usual, stirring frequently to prevent lumps. Once the grits were cooked and very soft, stir in a generous amount of butter and shredded sharp cheddar cheese, stirring until both melted completely into the grits. The result was a smooth, creamy, slightly cheesy bowl of warm comfort that required absolutely no chewing, just gentle swallowing. The texture was similar to very soft mashed potatoes or thick cream soup. Seniors loved this because grits were cheap, especially in the South, filling, and incredibly easy to prepare. The grits provided carbohydrates for energy, the butter added fat and richness, and the cheese contributed protein and calcium. Some seniors added a little salt, black pepper, or hot sauce for extra flavor. Others ate it plain, savoring the simple combination of grits, butter, and cheese. The cost was minimal. A bag of grits cost less than $1 and lasted for weeks. The prep time was about 20 minutes, though most of that was passive stirring time. Today, cheese grits are still served as a side dish in Southern restaurants, but eating them as a complete supper, alone, in a bowl, as the entire meal, has disappeared. For tired seniors in the 1960s, this was Southern comfort. No chewing needed, just comfort. Cream of celery soup was the smooth, savory supper seniors turned to when they needed something warm and filling with no chewing required. Open a can of Campbell's condensed cream of celery soup, add 1 can of milk, not water, milk made it creamier and more satisfying, pour into a saucepan, and heat while stirring until hot and steaming. Pour into a bowl and eat with a spoon. The soup was thick, smooth, and required no chewing. The celery was pureed so fine it was imperceptible, and the cream base was velvety. Seniors ate this when they were too tired to cook, when their dentures were out, or when they simply wanted something familiar and easy. The soup provided carbohydrates from the thickeners, calcium from the milk, and a little vegetable nutrition from the celery base. Some seniors crumbled saltine crackers into the soup and let them dissolve into a soft mush, adding a little bulk without requiring chewing. Others ate it plain, savoring the mild celery flavor and creamy texture. The cost was minimal, under 30 cents per can, and 1 can made a full supper. The prep time was under 5 minutes. Today, cream of celery soup is still available, but it's mostly used as a casserole ingredient rather than eaten as a solo meal. For tired seniors in the 1960s who needed something warm, smooth, and easy to swallow, this was a reliable supper that never failed to comfort. No chewing needed, just comfort. Creamed spinach, mashed carrots, split pea soup, soft cheese grits, cream of celery soup. 5 more gentle suppers seniors made when energy ran low. Everyone was smooth, warm, and easy to swallow. These meals weren't about giving up. They were about taking care of yourself when no one else was there. In the 1960s, creamed chicken was a staple supper for seniors who needed soft, easy-to-swallow meals when chewing felt impossible. This wasn't fancy restaurant food. It was practical, gentle comfort cooked in one pot on the stovetop. Grandmothers would take leftover boiled chicken, shred it finely with 2 forks until it fell apart into tender strings, then fold it into a simple white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. The result was a smooth, creamy mixture that required absolutely no chewing and went down easily with just a spoon. And sometimes they'd add a pinch of salt, a dash of white pepper, or a sprinkle of parsley for color. But the base recipe stayed the same: soft chicken suspended in warm, velvety sauce. Seniors living alone could make a batch in 20 minutes, then eat it over soft white bread, mashed potatoes, or plain rice. The bread soaked up the cream and became spoon-soft. The potatoes melted into the sauce. The rice absorbed every bit of flavor. Cost per serving rarely topped 50 cents, and even when chicken was expensive, because one breast stretched into 2 or 3 meals. Nutritionally, creamed chicken delivered complete protein from the chicken, calcium from the milk, and fat from the butter, enough energy to sustain someone through a long, tiring day. It was warm, filling, and required zero jaw effort. Mashed squash with butter. In the 1960s, mashed squash with butter was a soft, sweet, no-chew supper that seniors made when they were too tired to cook anything complicated. This wasn't a side dish. It was the main event. Grandmothers would take a winter squash, butternut, acorn, or Hubbard, cut it in half, scoop out the seeds, and bake it cut side down in a shallow pan of water until the flesh turned soft and custard-like. The baking took 45 minutes to an hour, but the actual work time was under 5 minutes. Cut, scoop, bake, done. Once the squash cooled enough to handle, they'd scrape the flesh into a bowl with a spoon, mash it smooth with a fork or potato masher, then stir in a tablespoon or 2 of butter and a pinch of salt. The butter melted into the hot squash, turning it glossy and rich. Some added a tiny sprinkle of brown sugar or a dash of cinnamon, but most left it plain. The squash's natural sweetness was enough. The result was a thick, smooth puree that required zero chewing and tasted like autumn comfort. Seniors ate it warm, straight from the bowl, often with a glass of milk or a slice of soft bread on the side. Cost per serving was under 20 cents. A single squash could yield 2 or 3 meals. Nutritionally, squash delivered vitamin A for vision, fiber for digestion, and complex carbohydrates for steady energy. The butter added fat and calories, important for seniors who struggled to eat enough. Mashed squash was also incredibly easy to digest. The long baking broke down the squash's fibers, and the butter coated the stomach gently. Beef broth with soft bread soaked in. In the 1960s, beef broth with soft bread soaked in was a no-chew supper that seniors made when they were too tired to cook or chew anything solid. This wasn't a recipe in the traditional sense. It was a technique, a way of turning 2 humble ingredients into a warm and filling meal that required only a spoon and patience. Grandmothers would heat a can of Campbell's beef broth, or make their own by simmering beef bones with water, salt, and a bay leaf for an hour. Once the broth was hot and fragrant, they'd tear slices of soft white bread, Wonder Bread, store-brand sandwich bread, or day-old homemade, into bite-sized pieces and drop them into the broth. Bread soaked up the liquid immediately, turning soft and spongy, almost dissolving into the broth. Within minutes, the bowl held a thick porridge-like mixture that required no chewing at all. Seniors could eat it with a spoon, letting the warm, salty broth slide down their throats, while the soft bread provided gentle bulk and carbohydrates. Some added a pat of butter to the bowl for extra calories and richness. Others stirred in a beaten egg at the end, letting it cook gently in the hot broth to add protein. Cost per serving was under 15 cents. A can of broth cost a dime, and bread was cheap. Nutritionally, this meal provided sodium and hydration from the broth, carbohydrates from the bread, and, if they added butter or egg, fat and protein. It wasn't a complete meal by modern nutritional standards, but for a senior living alone who'd lost their appetite or couldn't chew, it was enough to keep them going. The dish had deep roots in European peasant cooking, where bread and broth soups sustained families through winter. And by the 1960s, it had become a standard invalid supper in American homes. Seniors who'd grown up in the Depression remembered their mothers making bread and milk or bread and broth when money was tight, and they carried that knowledge forward into old age. Today, beef broth with soaked bread has vanished from American tables, replaced by canned soup and frozen dinners. But for seniors in the 1960s who were too tired to cook or chew, this simple supper mattered. It was warm, gentle, cheap, and dignified, a way to feed yourself when your body said enough. In the 1960s, Campbell's cream of mushroom soup was a no-chew supper that seniors made in under 5 minutes when they were too tired to cook anything from scratch. This wasn't homemade soup, it was convenience food at its simplest. It worked. Seniors would open a can of Campbell's condensed cream of mushroom soup, dump it into a small saucepan, add 1 can of whole milk, the can served as a measuring cup, and stir over medium heat until the soup was hot and smooth. The mushrooms in the soup were pre-chopped and soft, the cream base was silky, and the whole thing required 0 chewing. Seniors ate it straight from a bowl with a spoon, sometimes with a few saltine crackers crumbled on top, if they could manage the texture, but often just plain. Cost per serving was under 30 cents. A can of soup cost 25 cents, and milk was cheap. Nutritionally, cream of mushroom soup provided some protein and calcium from the milk, a bit of fat from the cream base, and sodium for flavor and hydration. It wasn't a powerhouse meal, but it was easy to digest, warm, and filling enough to sustain someone through an evening. The soup's smooth texture made it ideal for seniors with denture problems, jaw pain, or swallowing difficulties. There were no chunks to choke on, no tough bits to chew, no bones to pick through, just warm, creamy liquid that slid down easily. Seniors who lived alone and felt too exhausted to cook relied on Campbell's soups as a dignified way to feed themselves without admitting defeat. The soup represented American convenience culture at its peak. Shelf-stable, affordable, easy to prepare, and comforting. By the 1960s, Campbell's had become synonymous with soup in many American households, and cream of mushroom was one of the most popular flavors. Seniors who'd grown up cooking from scratch didn't always love the canned version, but they appreciated the simplicity. No chopping, no simmering, no cleanup beyond 1 pot and 1 bowl. In the 1960s, soft macaroni and milk sauce was a no-chew supper that seniors made when they needed something warm, filling, and gentle on the stomach. This wasn't mac and cheese. It was simpler, plainer, and softer. Grandmothers would boil elbow macaroni in salted water until it was very soft. Not al dente, but overcooked to the point where it could be mashed with a fork. They'd drain the macaroni, return it to the pot, and stir in whole milk, a tablespoon of butter, and a pinch of salt. The milk heated gently, the butter melted into it, and the soft macaroni absorbed the liquid, creating a thick, porridge-like mixture. Some added a sprinkle of black pepper or a handful of grated cheese for flavor, but many left it plain. The result was a bowl of soft, milk-soaked pasta that required almost no chewing and went down easily with a spoon. Seniors ate it warm. I sometimes with a slice of soft bread on the side and found it comforting and filling. Cost per serving was under 50 cents. A box of macaroni cost 20 cents and lasted for several meals. Milk was cheap, and butter was a staple. Nutritionally, this dish provided carbohydrates from the pasta for energy, calcium and protein from the milk, and fat from the butter. It wasn't a complete meal by modern standards, but for a senior who'd lost their appetite or couldn't chew solid food, was enough to keep them going. The dish was easy to digest. The overcooked pasta broke down quickly in the stomach, and the milk coated the digestive tract gently. Seniors with sensitive stomachs, denture problems, or jaw fatigue relied on soft macaroni and milk sauce as a way to feed themselves without pain or struggle. The dish had roots in European peasant cooking, where pasta and milk soups sustained families through winter, and by the 1960s it had become a quiet staple in American homes. Seniors who'd grown up poor remembered their mothers making similar dishes during hard times, and they carried that knowledge forward into old age. Today, soft macaroni and milk sauce has vanished from American kitchens, replaced by boxed mac and cheese and frozen dinners. But for seniors in the 1960s who were too tired to cook or chew, this simple supper mattered. It was warm, gentle, cheap, and filling, a way to care for yourself when your body needed softness and your spirit needed comfort. Creamed chicken, mashed squash with butter, beef broth with soft bread, cream of mushroom soup, soft macaroni and milk sauce. 5 more no-chew suppers that seniors made when they were too tired to cook or chew. Each one was soft, warm, and easy to swallow. Not defeat, but dignity. In the 1960s, mashed white beans were a no-chew supper that seniors made when they needed protein, fiber, and something warm that didn't require chewing. This wasn't a fancy side dish. It was a main meal, eaten straight from the bowl with a spoon. Grandmothers would start with canned white beans, Great Northern, navy beans, or cannellini, because dried beans required hours of soaking and simmering, and by the time you were old and tired, canned was simply smarter. They'd drain the beans, dump them into a small saucepan, add a splash of the bean liquid or plain water, and heat them over low heat until they were warm and soft. Then they'd mash the beans with a fork or potato masher until they reached a smooth, thick consistency, like refried beans, but without the frying. They'd stir in a tablespoon of butter for richness, a pinch of salt for flavor, and sometimes a dash of black pepper or a sprinkle of dried parsley. The result was a creamy, protein-rich puree that required zero chewing and tasted earthy and satisfying. Seniors ate it plain or spooned it over soft bread, or thinned it with a bit more water to make a soup-like consistency. Cost per serving was under 30 cents. A can of beans cost 20 cents and provided 2 servings. Nutritionally, mashed white beans were a powerhouse, high in protein, fiber, iron, and complex carbohydrates. They were also easy to digest once mashed, and they kept seniors feeling full for hours. Fiber helped with digestion, important for elderly people whose systems had slowed down. The protein supported muscle maintenance and overall health. The carbohydrates provided steady energy without spiking blood sugar. Seniors who couldn't afford meat, couldn't chew meat, or simply didn't want to cook meat, relied on mashed white beans as a plant-based protein source that was cheap, shelf-stable, and easy to prepare. The dish had roots in Southern and Appalachian cooking, where beans were a staple protein, and by the 1960s it had become a quiet standby for elderly people living alone. In the 1960s, unstrained vegetable broth was a no-chew supper that seniors made when they needed hydration, warmth, and nutrients, but couldn't manage solid food. This wasn't store-bought broth. It was homemade, made from vegetable scraps, and simmered until all the flavor and nutrients leached into the water. Grandmothers would save carrot peelings, celery ends, onion skins, potato peels, and any wilted vegetables from the crisper drawer. They'd put everything into a large pot, cover it with water. I add a bay leaf and a pinch of salt, and simmer it for an hour. The vegetables broke down, releasing their vitamins, minerals, and flavor into the liquid. Once the broth was fragrant and golden, they'd strain it through a fine mesh sieve or cheesecloth, discarding the solids and keeping only the smooth, clear liquid. The result was a warm, savory broth that required zero chewing and went down easily. Seniors drank it from a mug like tea or ate it from a bowl with a spoon, sometimes with a few overcooked noodles or a bit of soft bread soaked in. Cost per serving was essentially zero. The broth was made from scraps that would have been thrown away. Nutritionally, strained vegetable broth provided minerals like potassium and magnesium. The broth was easy to digest, no fiber to irritate the gut, no fat to slow digestion, just pure liquid nutrition. It was also shelf-stable once made. Seniors could simmer a big pot on Sunday and reheat a cup each evening for the rest of the week. The practice of making vegetable broth from scraps was common in European and American cooking for centuries, and by the 1960s, it had become a quiet tradition among elderly people who'd grown up during the Depression and learned never to waste anything. Today, most people buy boxed vegetable broth or use bouillon cubes. But for seniors in the 1960s who were too tired to cook or chew, strained vegetable broth mattered. It was warm, gentle, free, and nourishing, a way to care for yourself when solid food felt impossible. In the 1960s, pureed pumpkin soup was a no-chew supper that seniors made in late fall and winter when fresh pumpkins were cheap and canned pumpkin was always in the pantry. This wasn't fancy French bisque. It was simple, smooth, and warming. Grandmothers would open a can of plain pumpkin puree, not pumpkin pie filling, just pure pumpkin. Dump it into a saucepan, add an equal amount of whole milk or chicken broth, and stir over medium heat until everything was hot and well combined. They'd season it with a pinch of salt, a dash of white pepper, and sometimes a tiny sprinkle of nutmeg or sage for warmth. The result was a thick, velvety soup that required absolutely no chewing and tasted like autumn comfort. Seniors ate it from a bowl with a spoon, sometimes with a small pat of butter stirred in for richness, sometimes plain. Cost per serving was under 50 cents. A can of pumpkin cost 30 cents and made 2 servings. Nutritionally, pureed pumpkin soup was a vitamin A powerhouse. Pumpkin is one of the richest sources of beta-carotene, which supports vision, immune function, and skin health. The milk added calcium and protein, and the soup's smooth texture made it easy to digest. Seniors with sensitive stomachs, denture problems, or swallowing difficulties found pumpkin soup soothing and filling. It didn't irritate the stomach, didn't require chewing, and didn't leave them feeling heavy or bloated. The soup also had a natural sweetness that made it appealing even to seniors who'd lost their appetite. The dish had roots in colonial American cooking when pumpkins were a staple crop and pumpkin soup was common fare, and by the 1960s it had evolved into a simple, shelf-stable meal for elderly people living alone. Seniors who'd grown up on farms remembered their mothers making fresh pumpkin soup from whole pumpkins, but by the 1960s, canned pumpkin made the process faster and easier. Today, pureed pumpkin soup is mostly associated with trendy fall menus and coffee shop flavors, but it's rarely made at home. For seniors in the 1960s who were too tired to cook or chew, though, pureed pumpkin soup mattered. It was warm, smooth, nutritious, and comforting, a bowl of autumn that nourished the body and soothed the spirit when solid food felt like too much work. In the 1960s, soft polenta with butter was a no-chew supper that seniors, especially those from Italian or Eastern European backgrounds, made when they needed something warm, filling, and gentle. Polenta is simply cornmeal cooked in water or milk until it becomes a thick, creamy porridge. Grandmothers would bring 3 or 4 cups of water to a boil. We'd add a generous pinch of salt, then slowly whisk in 1 cup of coarse cornmeal, not instant, the real stuff. They'd stir constantly for about 20 minutes as the cornmeal absorbed the water and thickened into a smooth, custard-like consistency. Once the polenta was cooked, they'd stir in a tablespoon or two of butter, letting it melt into glossy pools on the surface. Some added a handful of grated Parmesan cheese for extra flavor and protein, but many ate it plain. The result was a bowl of warm, soft, buttery polenta that required zero chewing and tasted like comfort. Seniors ate it with a spoon, sometimes with a soft poached egg on top, sometimes with a drizzle of milk to thin it out, sometimes just plain. Cost per serving was under 20 cents. Cornmeal was one of the cheapest staples in the grocery store, and a 1-pound bag lasted for weeks. Nutritionally, polenta provided complex carbohydrates for energy, some fiber for digestion, and, when made with butter and cheese, fat and protein. It was easy to digest, especially when cooked until very soft, and it kept seniors feeling full for hours. The butter added calories, which was important for elderly people who struggled to eat enough. Seniors with denture problems, jaw pain, or swallowing difficulties relied on soft polenta as a staple supper because it required no chewing and went down smoothly. The dish had deep roots in Italian peasant cooking. Where polenta sustained families through winter, and by the 1960s it had become a quiet standby for elderly Italian Americans who remembered their mothers making it. Non-Italian seniors sometimes called it cornmeal mush and ate it savory or sweet, but the concept was the same: soft, warm, filling, cheap. Today, polenta is mostly seen as a trendy restaurant side dish, but it's rarely made at home. For seniors in the 1960s who were too tired to cook or chew, though, soft polenta with butter mattered. It was warm, smooth, affordable, and nourishing, a bowl of simple comfort when everything else felt too hard. In the 1960s, warm milk with butter and salt was the simplest no-chew supper a senior could make, and sometimes it was the only thing they could manage. This wasn't a recipe, it was survival. Grandmothers who were too tired to cook, too weak to stand at the stove, or simply too overwhelmed by loneliness and exhaustion would pour a cup of whole milk into a small saucepan, heat it gently over low heat until it was warm but not boiling, then stir in a teaspoon of butter and a pinch of salt. The butter melted into the milk, making it richer and more caloric. The salt added flavor and electrolytes. The result was a warm, creamy drink that went down easily and provided fat, protein, calcium, and a bit of comfort. Seniors sipped it slowly from a mug, letting the warmth spread through their chest and stomach. Cost per serving was under 10 cents. Milk was cheap, butter was a staple, salt was free. Nutritionally, warm milk with butter provided complete protein, calcium for bones, fat for energy, and vitamin D if the milk was fortified. It wasn't a full meal, but for a senior who couldn't face solid food, it was enough to sustain them through the night. The drink was incredibly easy to digest. Milk is designed by nature to be digestible, and the butter added gentle calories without taxing the stomach. Seniors with nausea, loss of appetite, or severe fatigue relied on warm milk with butter as a way to get some nutrition into their bodies when everything else felt impossible. The practice of drinking warm milk for comfort and nourishment was ancient. Mothers had given it to sick children for centuries, and by the 1960s it had become a quiet ritual for elderly people living alone. Some added a drop of vanilla extract or a sprinkle of cinnamon for flavor, but most drank it plain. Today, warm milk is mostly associated with bedtime routines and sleep aids, but it's rarely thought of as a meal. For seniors in the 1960s who were too tired to cook or chew, though, warm milk with butter and salt mattered. It was the simplest supper in the world, just 3 ingredients and 5 minutes. But it kept them fed, kept them warm, and kept them alive when nothing else would do. It was survival with dignity. One warm 30, no-chew suppers. 30 meals that mattered when chewing felt impossible. Every single one of these 30 no-chew suppers, creamed chicken, mashed squash, beef broth with soft bread, pumpkin soup,